Good afternoon and welcome to the July 18th, 2013 special meeting of the Glendale Water and Power Commission. I will now proceed with roll call. Commissioner Camargo.
Here.
Chan.
Present.
Yao.
Present.
Ajemian.
Present.
Hale. Here. Before we proceed with item 2, we have a special introduction. City Manager Scott Ochoa.
Good evening, members of the Commission. My name is Scott Ochoa. I'm the City Manager for City of Glendale. And I would like to provide just a bit of context for tonight's meeting, both in terms of the players that you'll see here for the City and GWP, and also why we're doing this as a special meeting. We, as you may know, and I think most of you know, but certainly the viewing public deserves to know, our General Manager, Steve Zern, who has been with the city for many, many years, has unfortunately fallen ill. And he is, as we would call it, on the disabled list. He is going to be on the shelf for just a little bit of time. Steve has been at the helm of GWP now for about a year, and because he is having to stay out of the operation while he heals up from a procedure, we are going to have Deputy City Manager John Toctalian act in his stead as the acting GM during that period of time that we anticipate to be mid-September, maybe late September, depending on Steve. And we want to make sure that he takes his time, heals up, and comes back to us just as soon as he can, but as well as he possibly can. Certainly, John will be supported both with the management staff and leadership staff in GWP with Chief Assistant General Managers Mr. Linz, Mr. Abweg, and also the management services staff as well as the legal team. So I want to make sure that you have and can maintain the utmost confidence that we will be providing the highest level of service, supervision, and leadership to GWP, answer your questions, provide a level of attention to detail and attention to your needs and questions, particularly for our two new commissioners. So you know that the door is open, the phone is certainly available to you, and personal contact and interaction is always preferred because it's good to get to know folks and how we can interact with one another. With respect to the special meeting tonight, when Steve was first taken ill, we thought we would slow down, and ultimately, as the extent of his illness and the amount of time that he would be out grew, we decided that we needed to might as well accelerate and try to move forward expeditiously. We had been moving ahead with our proposed rate plan for GWP Electric. This is something that had been discussed last year in the doldrums of the economic recovery, such as it were. Council opted to hold off. At this point, we are moving towards a rate plan. We've done the public outreach, and we want to stay on track to bring that to you for your advice to City Council. So in moving, first slowing down and then accelerating, we are asking that we have this special meeting really as an opportunity for the Commission to select its officers and leadership, to provide our newer commissioners with some context and background by way of a presentation from, I believe, Mr. Abweg and perhaps Mr. Linz as well, and certainly City Attorney's Office, to give that level of context. And after having at least one meeting, generously giving you at least one meeting under your belt, then come back next week and be able to undertake the rate case so that we can get to City Council in August. So we do ask and beg your indulgence, forgiveness for the time crunch. And this is one of those things that the philosopher and emperor Marcus Aurelius had remarked that it loved to happen. Life loved to happen. Things beyond our control will impact the pace under which we take certain steps. So, again, without any further ado, I would like to introduce you to John Toctalian, and certainly avail yourself of myself, my Assistant City Manager Yasmin Beers, or any of the management staff in GWP. Thank you very much for accommodating this special meeting.
Item 2, introductions and election of Glendale Water and Power Commissioners. A, introduction of new commissioners, Manuel Camargo and Matthew Hale.
Commissioners and staff, I just wanted to extend a welcome on behalf of Glendale Water and Power and the city generally to our newest commissioners. We have Manuel Carmago and we have Matthew Hale. We're very pleased to have you both as part of the GWP Commission, and we welcome your experience and your insight and your input into the policies and processes of GWP. And I'd like to ask you to, if you're willing to share a few words about yourself and let everyone know your background.
Good evening. My name is Matthew Hale, and I am a policy director for Councilman Paul Krikorian from the City of Los Angeles. Previous to that experience, I worked in the California State Legislature in the Assembly for former Assembly member Paul Krikorian, where I also represented the City of Glendale, or helped represent the City of Glendale, working for Paul. There I worked on renewable portfolio standard legislation and energy efficiency legislation, and was the chief staffer for my boss on the Utilities and Commerce Committee. So I have some state experience. Since my boss was elected to the Los Angeles City Council, I've been working for him and staffing him on the Energy and Environment Committee for the City of LA, where we oversee and handle rate actions for the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power. So I have some significant utility experience. I'm looking forward to serving the City of Glendale.
Hi, Manuel Camargo. I'm I suppose, career-long public affairs and communications specialist. I work currently at Southern California Edison, where I focus on public affairs issues affecting the utility and other major initiatives. Prior to that, worked in a private public relations firm. I also currently serve as an adjunct professor at Cal Poly Pomona, where I teach public relations writing on occasion, and been a resident of Glendale for about 15 years, and also volunteer as a coach and referee in AYSO. And probably all know there are about more than 3,000 kids from Glendale who participate in AYSO. So thank you for the opportunity to say a few words, and do look forward to serving the city.
Thank you, and thanks also to our returning commissioners. We really appreciate your service and the hours that you dedicate to attending these meetings and delving into the issues, and we're just pleased to have all of you as part of this commission.
Do you mind if we, maybe the existing commissioner, give us, say, a few words and maybe welcome the new commissioner as well?
Absolutely.
Well, I also want to welcome the two new commissioners, Mr. Hale and Mr. Camargo. It's a pleasure having you on board, and I know that we'll have some fruitful discussions, and I look forward to having those type of discussions, as well as leading GWP to through the rate plan, as well as some operational issues that will be encompassing. So, I mean, as you already know, I'm one of the longest-serving commissioners here, and I've been on this commission since 2007, actually. So it's been a while, and I do like serving the city. It's been a pleasure, and I've also, from a utility, I work for SoCal Gas, and I've been with that company for at least 17 years. So it's been a pleasure working in the utility business, and just knowing what Glendale goes through, it's really helpful that we have that perspective as well. So I look forward to working with you guys and enjoy our future success together.
Hi, my name is Terry Chan. I also want to welcome our two new commissioners. I was appointed in year 2008. By training, I'm an electrical engineer. I currently work in Los Angeles Department of Water and Power. I've worked in the areas of power distribution design, load forecasting, station design, rate design, and customer service. In the last 5 years, my fellow commissioners and I, we have attacked issues including renewable regulatory mandates for renewable energy, power, water supply, quality, smart grid, and other critical utility issues. And all that, while we were undergoing the biggest economic downturn, since the Great Depression, and at the same time, we had a major GWP management change. And it has been a stimulating and interesting 5 years. I want to thank staff and management of GWP, because without all your hard work, we would not be where we're at today. I look forward to working with all of the managers and staff again this year, and also the new commissioners in this new term. Thanks.
My name is Armin Ajamian. My quick background, I have an accounting and finance background. I'm actually a CPA, but don't practice anymore. I a digital media and marketing company. I've been on the commission now for the past 4 years, and I have one more year to, I guess, serve based on our recent interesting elections that happened in Glendale. I am welcome to both of you, and I'm very glad that you guys have a strong industry knowledge and will help us with your comments and your experience in dealing with some serious issues that we have at hand. Thank you.
B, election of Glendale Water and Power Commission officers.
Given that we don't currently have a president, I'll go ahead and kick this off for you. So we have the need to elect both a secretary and a president per the Glendale Municipal Code for this commission. And what I'd like to do is go ahead and open the elections and ask for any nominations for president of the GWP Commission.
I would like to nominate Commissioner Hugh Yao for president.
Okay,
And I accept. You would.
great. Are there any other nominations for president of the commission? Okay, hearing none, are there any nominations for secretary of the GWP Commission?
I guess I will nominate Commissioner Chen for secretary.
I accept.
Okay, are there any other nominations for secretary? Okay, then we'll go ahead and close the nominations, and we'll start the election process for the president of the commission. All those in favor of Commissioner Yao as president of the GWP Commission, please say aye.
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 Okay, all those, any opposed? Okay, congratulations.
Thank you.
Commissioner Yao, you're now President Yao of the Commission. Okay, and now we'll hold the election for the Secretary of the Commission. All those in favor of Commissioner Chan as Secretary of the GWP Commission, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, then you, congratulations, Commissioner Chan, are now the Secretary of the Commission. So I would ask President Yao to please, I guess, move to the center seat there and grab your gavel.
Gavel for now.
I will let you take over the meeting from here.
Well, thank you, Ms. Godinez. And thank you, my fellow commissioners, for the appointment. And actually, it's my second term as president, so I'm glad to be back and to help this commission move forward with this year. And so let's move on with the agenda so we have a quick meeting. 2C, please.
C, introduction of Glendale Water and Power Management to commissioners. Review Glendale Water and Power Organization chart.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. John Tuktalian. Congratulations to everybody who was appointed, nominated, reappointed to the Commission. I'm going to ask our three members of the leadership team in GWP to come up and introduce themselves, because who better to introduce their sections than the people who actually are directly responsible for them. As they walk up, I can call their names. Why don't you guys come on up? We have our Customer Services Administrator, Tammy Vallier, our Chief Assistant General Manager, Steve Linz, and our Chief Assistant General Manager, Ramona Bueg, who are all here. Ramon will make a PowerPoint presentation about our department in a little bit more detail after these introductions, but I'd like to start with Steve.
Good evening, Mr. President, members of the Commission. Once again, I'm Steve Linz, one of two Chief Assistant General Managers for Glendale Water and Power, and I'm generally in charge of business strategy, power supply, and support services. I run a power plant that we've got here in the city. It's got about 48 employees. Got external generation and transmission, got an energy trading and resource planning group, as well as a large customer group, and then finally I've got a group that handles warehouse and some of the facilities down at the plant and around the city. And as Mr. Tuktalian mentioned, Ramon's going to go through his PowerPoint and show you some of the slides you've seen before that describes where some of these systems are around the western United States, and a little more detail about how our areas break down.
Good evening, President Yao, members of the Commission. I'm Tammy Valier. I'm the Customer Services Administrator in charge of customer service. Within customer service, I have the billing and customer support section, which handles the billing, the daily billing, account maintenance, delinquent collections, and also revenue protection. I also have the contact and payment center, which is the front counter, payment processing, and the call center. We also have field services, which is the field service for turn on and turn off of customers. They also do meter mitigation for residential and small business for the automated metering, which may not be communicating or may be changed out. And also there's still some meter reading function that obviously is going away, and it's few and far between. But we do still have some meters. If they're not communicating, we do have to go out and get a meter read. We have the opt-outs, so we have to go and get a meter. And then I also have the training section, which primarily trains the customer service office, but they also do train other users of the North Star system, which may be in the police department, some people in public works, fire, any of the services that are actually billed through the system and on our utility bill.
Good evening, President Yao, Commissioners. Ramona Bueg, Chief Assistant General Manager. I'm responsible for both the electric distribution system as well as for the entire water works system. And there's a third function I serve, which is I'm also the designated compliance officer with respect to the NERC and WAC, which is the reliability compliance for the electric system. I will go through the organization as part of my presentation, if you don't mind, if I can get this going. One of the things I've been asked to do tonight is, for the benefit mainly of the new commissioners, is to give you an overview of who we are, what we do, and some of the statistics that we track to see how well we're doing and how we're meeting the needs of our customers. So with that, let me start with our mission statement. This is the one that we publish in our budget and in our presentation to City Council. And our mission is to provide the highest quality public works services to the public and other departments through balanced efforts to maintain a cost-effective operation. Our mission is to deliver quality and delivering quality and innovation in every aspect of our operation. And there's a key point in the innovation part as we go through what it is that we do with our system. So let me start with the overall organization. As Mr. Ochoa mentioned, we have a general manager, and Mr. Tactalian is currently the interim. In that, we have 4 main divisions: the business strategy, power supply, and support services, that's managed by Mr. Lins; customer services by Ms. Valier; and the electric works and water works, which is currently under my management. Okay. And I'll go into details with that, starting with the customer service division, which serves both electric and water. So they really are the first voices or first faces that our customers deal with. And as Tommy already went through her division, she covers, or her group covers, the billing center mainly, does the counter assistance, the metering, field services. And then the power division really comprises Mr. Lins and myself in the electric service. And this just gives you an overview of the system when we talk about the power system. This is the city of Glendale. We have about 33 square miles of service that we provide. And what you see in the middle here is basically are what we call sub-transmission lines. These are the lines that connect the 12 substations throughout the city. Those 12 substations, in turn, we have about 108 distribution feeders at 4 and 12 kV. The lines that you see going around, that's at 69 kV or 69,000 volts or 34,000 volts. And through the 12 substations and 108 feeders is where we feed or serve about 84,500 meters. And just to give you an overview of what that means is our system so far we picked at 343 megawatts. We have the sub-transmission lines that I talked about. We have the Grayson Power Plant. To put it in perspective, Grayson Power Plant has capacity of about 254 megawatts, and our peak is beyond the capacity of Grayson Power Plant. So the main point here is we have two interconnection points, one with LA and one with Burbank. Those are the two different means that we're able to bring the energy that Mr. Lin's group purchased to serve power here in the city of Glendale. Once it gets through those interconnection points, it goes through what we call the electric delivery system, and that's where the substations that I talked about goes through, and this is how we're feeding those 84,500 meters, which is all of about 200,000 residents and businesses that we have. By the way, you can ask any questions at any time. This is just to show you where we've been, what we've done. Back about a year ago, we did a presentation with respect to the dashboard. These are the measurements of how we're reporting, how we progress, how well we're doing in meeting our goals. So in the 1213 dashboard, these are the things that we reported for the electric or power division. There was one major event that we had to deal with in 2011, as you know, which is the windstorm. And the benefit of this is we did have sporadic outages. We didn't have wide area outages. We had some customers that were out for 3 days, mainly because we had poles down and lines down. But the reason we're reporting this is because of the maintenance, the improvements, and investment we made with the infrastructure. We didn't have any major problems. We're able to get the services back, again, except for some isolated areas, and we're actually able to provide assistance to our neighboring utility. We were recognized for twice now out of 4 years. Every 2 years, we apply for what's called a Reliable Public Power Service recognition through the APPA, or the American Public Power Association, and we're one of 176 utilities out of 2,000 that received that recognition. And we received what's called a platinum recognition. We missed the diamond point by 4 points. So our goal is to eventually get to what's called a diamond recognition. Our smart grid modernization has been rated as the model program by the Department of Energy, and I'll talk about that a little bit more when I talk about the modernization. And most important part here, later on, I'll talk a little bit more about why we're so proud of passing the NERC and WEC reliability audit. Because for the most part, what that means is we weren't penalized, unlike other utilities who had been found to have some problems with their system. These two, the RP3 plus passing the reliability audit, are testimonies of how well we've been delivering reliable power to our customers.
Mr. Bragg,
Yes,
let me
sir.
ask, what about the customer satisfaction and customer excellence? I mean, I know Tammy's group handles that perspective. Do you have also the stats on the pursuit of excellence on customer service?
Yeah, from time to time. I don't have the data in front of me, but from time to time, Tammy will report to you what those surveys are and how we're doing and how we compare with the other utilities. I think we're due for the next survey this summer. So they'll be coming up, and we'll be reporting that to you very shortly.
Right, that's great.
Okay. And in the dashboard, these are the projects that we said we have completed, and we completed, and the dollar values associated with it. When we talk about transmission lines, these are the transmission lines that we have either upgraded, replaced, or basically created new ones within the city. We've done substation upgrades and a slew of projects that we've done. But most of this really, not only is this an infrastructure improvement, but every project that we do, when we touch them, we're also modernizing them. So when you hear us talk about modernization, although some of the budgets are shown separate, we are actually modernizing our system as we touch them. Okay? And as simple as this fuse coordination, that's a very low financial budget for us. We probably budget less than $1 million per year, but that has given us a lot of value in terms of reliability. I was mentioning to Mr. Taktalian that last Saturday we had a cable that blew up that failed in Montrose. And in the old days, that would have taken an entire area, an entire feeder. But because of the coordination, the modernization that we're doing, the outage occurred, the cable failed, and the affected area was limited to a very, very small, actually within a block. In the old days, we'd be scrambling looking for the problem, but because of these efforts, we've been able to isolate them automatically.
Can you give us perspective of how long these projects took and when were they completed?
All these projects we started doing back in 2005. This was part of the building a stronger GWP that we reported back in those years. This is after the years when we're having a lot of problems. We decided we need to take some actions to improve our service. Future goals are identified, and I yellowed out the ones that's changed so we don't confuse that with the budget years. When we reported, the numbers are a little different, but what we wanted to do, we've identified that we need to spend hundreds of millions of dollars in our system for the infrastructure. And the main goal is to reduce the outages, continuously reduce the number of outages, and through improvement and replacement of aging equipment. We have a very old infrastructure. In the next 5 years, we need about $94 million on critical capital improvements. 59 million of those is on our distribution system, or what I refer to as the delivery system. $22 million for Grayson plant and energy, renewable energy development, and $12 million is specifically to the modernization, which is associated with the old smart grid program. Okay?
What's driving the $59 million of cost for the distribution system? What are the risks there?
In the $59 million, there's one major substation replacement that we have to do. We're also going to include one new switching substation. That also includes the conversion from 4 kV to 12 kV, more refusing program, and also installation of state-of-the-art relay protection.
On the investment, can you discern between the replacement of aging infrastructure versus investment in new technology or modernization? Or are you modernizing as you're replacing old?
We're modernizing as we're replacing. Even when we talk about 4 kV to 12 kV conversion, in the old days, when we replace or repair 4 kV, we replace it on in-kind. The way we're doing it now is if we're going to touch it, we only touch it once. So instead of putting an equal 4 kV system, we automatically upgrade to 12 kV, but still operate at 4. So when we do and go with the conversion, it's already been done. So in answer to your question, it's yes. Well, we are discerning, but at the same time, we want to touch it once. So if a relay fails, it's all electromechanical. We don't replace it with electromechanical. We go ahead and replace it with the electronic relays.
Thank you.
Because the incremental cost is really just the material. The labor is the same. So we're saving a lot.
Before you move on, I have a question. The $22 million for Grayson Power Plant and renewable energy development, that's all of the money you will need to reach the 33% by 2020 for renewables?
I'm going to have to call Mr. Lynch to answer that's specific to this area.
Okay.
Mr. President, members of the Commission, once again, Steve Lenz, Chief Assistant General Manager. That is primarily for maintenance at the plant and some minor project development for renewables. In addition to that, we've got about another $5.5 million to get from a year to get from 20% to 33%. So this is just capital improvement, this program here. And,
Okay.
and as I indicated, about $18 million of that 22 is just for maintenance at the plant. And then about another $4 million is for development of projects through an organization you've heard of, SCAPA, Southern California Public Power Authority. We're developing potential projects, so it's capital money to develop those projects. But it's not the total cost.
Right. In addition to that, you're talking about another $5 or $6 million
Per year at the
Per
end
year.
of at the end of the 2030, 2020. Sorry, 2020. So to go
per
from
year
20%
from now to 2020?
to go from 20% to 33%, by the time we get to the end, it'll be about $5.5 million a year. But in between, we'll be ramping up to that $5 million a year. I don't think I have the total figure for the period from 20 to 33%. But at the end of the period, that'll cost us about an extra $5.5 million a year from 2020 on to get to that point.
Well, okay, no. We're supposed to have 20% already.
We're at about 20%
And
now.
that's right. And then from here to 2020, we're supposed to have 33% by then.
Correct. That's an additional 13%.
So it sounds like every year we're going to have to increase the amount of investment for renewables. And I think I'm hearing you saying that it's going to be at least $1 to $5 million per year.
Yeah, at the end, it's going to be $5 million.
At the end is 5.
We're actually going to be coming back to you next week with detailed slides on the cost of going from 20 to 33% total. I know that at the end of that period, it's going to be $5.5 million a year. I think the total is somewhere closer to 7 to 10 million. But next year, I'll come back to you. Next Monday, I'll come back to you with more detail on the total cost of going from 20% to 33%.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to make sure that that 22 is clear, that it's not really the total cost. Exactly. Thank you.
Well, and that's, in addition to, we've identified the expenses, we've identified what the future goals, what we're planning to do. But part of what we've done in the utility with GWP is, as you know, we had a major change in management about a year ago. We have new leadership. And our budget in 12-13 actually was reduced by about 20% or $53 million overall. That includes water and electric. So you will see that again come up. And at the same time, through the retirements, and when people left and layoffs, we're able to reduce our workforce by at least 15%.
So question, the reductions, what part of the budget are you talking about? Are these sort of operational, operations and maintenance, or is it capital investment?
Both. We really don't have a distinction on where staff is. It's either they're working O&M or they're working capital. So it's the overall staffing.
If I can add to that, I think to answer your question a little more fully, not only have we had decreases in the number of staffing throughout the organization, GWP specifically, we've also cut back on a number of the capital improvement projects as well. So there's a reduction in that aspect of it as well.
Okay. And so this is just some details of the dollars that I pointed out, the 59 million or so, the 22 million, and these are the different areas where how it's been split up. So for year one, 13-14, we're showing about $5 million and about $14 million, 14-15. And the reason this is here, this was the actual budget that was submitted to council back in May. And the source for this budget, which is going to be the subject next week, is in order for us to meet and complete this budget goal, what we're showing here is how we plan the funds to be spent, or where the funds are coming from in order to complete those goals. And what you see in green is the pay-go. We have very little money this year to do pay-go, which is about $413,000. One in red are customer reimbursed. Those are the ones that customers ask us to do an extension of a circuit. They pay us, and we do the work for them. And there's $10 million here that will be relying on bonds money. These are the things that we'll be discussing more in detail next week. Okay? And in terms of the operations, this is just to show you how the different groups, this is what we call the functional organization as opposed to the traditional org chart that you've seen. So within the electric, that's a group I'm responsible for. We have basically an operations group, engineering, and we have the dispatch center, control center. They're actually shared between water and electric, but they mainly do electric. And then you see in compliance here, I put a 1H plus. We do have a good compliance group, but we don't have an organization that's permanently assigned to compliance. I will explain that further later. And 1H means we have one hourly that's helping us out to make that happen. So in my group in operation, we have 68 staff, and that includes the linemen, the electricians, and what we call the boots on the ground for electric. and then the engineering, which do customer service, street light designs, T&D substations, relay protection, and so forth. And then Mr. Lin's group, I think he went over this already. He had 88 staff in his group, and I'll try to get through this. And then some of the current statistical data, just to relate to what it is that we do. The O&M that we spend per kilowatt hour sold is roughly about $0.087. That's less than, that's about 9 cents. Per circuit mile, we spend on an average about $309,000. And our expense per meter, that's based on 84,500 meters, and O&M budget is about 2,024. But in terms of kWh, on top of what we sold and the number of employees that we have, if we put some value in it, per employee is responsible for about 5.7 kWh, or 5,687 kilowatt hours per employee.
So Mr. Bragg, may I applaud you for providing that statistics? And I know that in the past commission meetings, these were the type of statistics that the public was interested in. So potentially, these are good numbers, but how do they compare to the industry average and stuff? Do you have an idea what that?
Yeah, well, I'd say for the most part, we're in the middle of the pack. We do have a comparison data. We're using the APPA guideline in terms of comparing, and we can report back to you how we compare with our sister cities. We have that. I just didn't have it available.
Oh, no, that's fine. I mean, this is great data, and I think for future meeting, it would be helpful to continue that type of analysis so that it gives us a perspective of how the utility is doing in terms of a apples-to-apples comparison. So
Okay.
It's great stuff.
All right.
Related question, if I can, would be, is this information that we simply review to compare ourselves in terms of our current performance, or does it also factor its way into your planning, and so that you can continue to perhaps move up relative to other utilities and their performance?
President Yao, members of the Commission, I think the answer to that is I think it's both. One of the problems that we tend to have with trying to compare performance from quarter to quarter, year to year to other agencies is it's very difficult oftentimes to compare apples to apples. There's all kinds of fruits in that basket. But we do our best to try to utilize industry standard type statistical data to do that. However, based on the way that we've been doing this organization-wide, even throughout other departments, not only do we utilize this data to try to compare it to other apples, but we also try to compare it to ourselves and see what was the trend, what was the change from quarter to quarter, from year to year, and what's driving all of that. By keeping a close eye on it, we then go ahead and take this data and utilize it in future decision making, whether it's budgets, deciding how much resources to apply to something, things of that nature. Mm-hmm. Does that answer the question?
Yes, it does, and I guess I would be in favor of using this type of data in order to be able to set targets, right? Because
Absolutely.
It's one thing to compare yourself, your own performance to your own past performance, but if there are, I think on a previous slide you talked about 2,000 utilities in the U.S.
Public utilities, yeah.
Public utilities in the U.S. If you decide that you're, at the lower end of that spectrum, then it tells you that simply setting incremental targets over your previous performance may not get you where you really want to be relative to other public utilities.
We'll do that. Then I mentioned the NERC and work compliance, and the reason we're highlighting this, most utilities right now, they have a separate department to do NERC and WEC compliance. We have managed to be able to do that through a committee. And the reason I'm pointing this out is there are a lot of penalties associated if they come and do an audit and they found that your system is causing some reliability issues, not just to your system, but also to your neighboring utility. So we're doing everything we can with a very proactive program to prevent that. And this is really what got our attention, is we don't want to have any fines that would be even coming close to this. We don't think we'll ever come to that, but that's the highest that they're willing to fine any utility that causes any outage that affected their neighboring utilities. Okay? So, and how are we doing that? Is we basically have a compliance committee. It's chaired by the general manager, And as compliance officer, that's the other function that we provide. And this is through basically coordination with the other departments. We have the audit department that's providing us assistance in reviewing our documents. Ms. Godinez is providing us guidance on some of the legal and legislative stuff. And these are basically what we call the subject matter experts. These are people that really know their business that help us develop the policies and procedures in order to meet the compliance. And then with that, I'm going to go to the water division. And similar to the electric, these are the facilities that we manage and operate for the water system. We have 3 service connections with MWD, one of them being Jim Rest. I believe Commissioner Hale and Commissioner Camargo were able to see it last time. And just several areas. We have about 397 miles of pipes that traverse through the city. And this is just a summary. And what I want to point out here is we do have 7 different pressure zones. In certain areas, we need to pump. In certain areas, we do gravity flow. And we do have the recycle system in the city that it's not quite fully developed, but we hope that someday we'll be able to fund it to be able to extend out throughout the city. Dashboard for water, similar to electric. These are the projects that were recently completed, the different reservoirs, the pipe replacements, as well as the cleaning. And the benefits for doing this, I want to point out the most is this contributes to what's best for the city, not just our being able to deliver quality water. We're able to maintain our Class 1 fire department rating because of these, the pressure and the availability of water for firefighting. This helps our residents with their insurance moving forward, there's a lot of pipe replacements. We want to invest back into the pipes. We want to avoid main breaks like they're experiencing with our neighbors in LA. And so we've identified the old pipes that were dated that we need to replace or pipes that we need to reline. So these are the things that are coming up. And those are the projects that we're going to be spending in the next 5 years, about $40 million. Unlike electric, water just had a rate increase, and we have bond money that we are spending for the next 3 years, and that this is what we intend to do with that bond money for the next 3 years.
And so all the all the work represented on that strategy slide then will be completed within the next 5-year period, is what you're
That's
saying?
correct. And as I stated, this is the bond money. This is how we intend to spend the $35 million in the next 3 years on those capital projects. And then after that, between the rate increase, due to the rate increase that we have, we'll be able to do about $4 to $5 million of pay-go projects. Similar improvements that we've done with electric. The reduction, it comes the same. But some of the projects that we've completed for water is basically we want to reduce the direct cost that we have in pumping the water. That's through the reduction of the energy that we have to use to treat water and to pump water. And we're also trying to increase our ability to pump more water from the wells to reduce our dependency from MWD. And similarly, we have this the org chart for water. There's about, I'm the half, by the way. I'm counting myself as the half for water. It's the operation, engineering, and water quality. Water quality is the one we're focusing a lot on. As you know, there's a lot of new regulations that's coming out. The Chrome 6 MCL is coming out at the end of the month, so that's something that our water quality group is trying to prepare for. In terms of statistical data, similar to electric, the O&M per acre foot of water delivered is about $1,335, but if you put that in gallons, we're barely spending under a penny per gallons of water based on O&M. So water, really, the way I would phrase it, water that we deliver is pretty cheap. So, and we spend about $96,500 per mile of water main. Each meter costs about $1,136, and each employee delivers about 176,366,000 gallons to our customers on an annual basis.
With the hands, right?
Yeah, with the pills. So, and this is the budget, just to give...
Mr. Bragg, just one grand question. I see that on the electric side, you have a slide for pursuit of excellence, but not on the water side. Can you elaborate on what the excellence that you're pursuing on the water side?
Well, I think the excellence on the water side that we should have highlighted is we are the model for Chrome 6 treatment. And that's something that moving forward, California Department of Public Health has requested for us to do some workshops for them, which we're coordinating. And what they wanted to do is take the data that we have, the progress that we've made with the testing and the results, and share that with the rest of the industry. And so they are giving us additional funding to be able to do that. And so we'll be doing a California tour to demonstrate what we've done to help the industry with respect to chromium-6.
Any other excellence that you want to mention on the water side?
Well, the pipe replacement and the other two big projects that we made, that we completed recently, the Diedrich Reservoir, the repiping, if you recall that we presented that to you several months ago, as well as the Chevy Chase. And the other one, the big item too, is the Solar B program. That's one of the ways where we've reduced the energy by using solar program to mix the water. And that reduces our cost in terms of chloramination or the treatment that we do by having an active mixing.
Yeah, that's great stuff. What about the like the electric side? How do you guys compare to the stats that you put in the last slide? Some of the per meter count and miles of water, per O&M per miles of water. Are you in the middle of the pack as well? Or
I think at least based on the water delivered per employee, since we're looking at the number of employees that other similar systems have, that more employees, I believe that we're pretty high in terms of gallons delivered per employee.
Which is a good thing. That
it's a good thing.
Yeah.
Good thing. So.
Great, thank you.
All right, and just to give you a highlight of the budget that was presented by Mr. Bob Elliott, the finance director, to our council recently for the upcoming budget for all of GWP. This is a quick summary. We have the salaries and benefits, M&O, capital outlay, and the total personnel that we have. At the same time, what we want to point out here, when we do the budget, we also have performance indicators that we watch, we report on a quarterly basis. And these are just examples. I believe for Glendale Water Power, we have about 27 or so indicators that we report.
Glendale Water and Power has in excess of 60 or 70 in total.
Okay.
I think one section has more than the other.
So on a quarterly basis, certain things are highlighted, and this is what we reported last time. And we're about to do the 13-14. But what I want to point out here, too, is that unlike other departments in the city, where the cost for salaries and benefits for GWP, it's barely 15% of our total budget. And in the budget summary that we presented, this is the strategic goals. These are the goals that were given to us that we're trying to meet. And this... Commissioner Camargo, you asked, these are the things that we track to make sure that we're continuously improving. And these are the things that we are held accountable to. Okay, these are just some examples. And for 13-14, we're trying to complete the relocation of all business units on campus. That's in progress. Actually, by next week, that will be completed. That's about a savings of about $90,000 a year for the utility. And these are things that are in progress. In terms of the fund summary, just to give you an idea of how big the utility is in terms of dollars, total budget for GWP it's about 265 combined electric, water, and the public benefit charge. But that's for 12-13, and we're looking at $299 million for next year. And this is just to show you the salaries and benefits where the $35 million come from, and how the M&O and capital improvements are broken down. And with that, any questions, comments,
Any questions
clarifications?
for Mr. Bragg?
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Bragg. Next item, please.
3 consent items. A, approval of the May 20th, 2013 special meeting minutes.
Any revisions or corrections to those minutes? I know that 3 of us were here, maybe 2 of us were here. You may?
Is there on the second page, the third line, is there, it says, Mr. Zern stated we will develop a defined plan? Sure that's what was intended.
Should define be crossed out or just?
It
develop a
seems like
plan?
it would be either to develop a plan or define a plan, but not develop a defined. I don't know if there was something missing from that sentence that was intended.
It was
So I
supposed to be
suppose if we
defined.
simply
develop a
define a
plan.
plan.
Well, since the previous sentence stating that we have in-house talent / staff that can address a comprehensive plan within 12 months, Mr. Zone stated that we will develop a plan.
Might be define and then develop.
Oh, okay. Develop and
It'll
define
be
a plan.
reversed.
Define. I don't know. How do you guys want to phrase that? I know Mr. Zone's not here to say what he actually spoke about.
I wasn't here either.
I don't know where you're looking. Can you point out which paragraph you're on?
At the top of the second page and on
The May
third
20th
line.
minutes?
Yeah, the May 20th.
Okay.
Yeah, define and develop a plan.
I think it was defined plan with a D at the end.
Define.
Defined plan.
Oh, define. Okay, nothing else.
Yeah, that's the only corrections. Any motion to approve the minute for the May 20th meeting?
So moved.
Second? Any second?
Second.
We don't really
Okay.
need to.
Well, but as amended. So we're
Yeah,
moving
as
to approve it as amended, and there's a second.
Okay.
So moving the May 20th minutes are approved as amended. So next item. 3B for the approval of the June 3rd minutes. Any other corrections or revisions?
Nope.
So do we need to move the minutes to approve, or?
No, President Yao, as Commissioner Chan was stating, you don't really need a motion as long as you've got unanimity. If it seems like
Okay.
there's some discussion, you can just ask that if there's no objection, then the minutes stand approved.
Right. So there's no revisions or no objections, then we move forward with the June 3rd meeting minutes as approved. Thank you. Next item, please.
4, report information. A, review Brown Act, Glendale Water and Power Commission procedures.
President Yao, members of the GWP Commission, my name is Christine Godinez. I'm Senior Assistant City Attorney. And again, welcome to our new commissioners. For the benefit of our new commissioners and as a refresher for our continuing commissioners, I'd like to give you an overview of the procedures that apply to this commission, as well as a brief summary of the Brown Act. So in the packets of material at your desk, I've given you a small stack of information which contains the Glendale Municipal Code provisions that pertain to the GWP Commission, certain procedures that have been adopted by this commission in the past, and then some information about Robert's Rules of Order and a couple of just procedural tips to help the meetings run smoothly. And in the first section of your packet is Glendale Municipal Code, Chapter 2.72, which is the section that directly pertains to this body. And that section states in a nutshell, there's 5 commissioners. You've all been appointed by a majority of the City Council. And we've elected a president and a secretary today in accordance with those procedures. And the president's job is to preside over the meetings. In his absence, we would elect a president pro tem. And then also we have a secretary, which keeps the record of the proceedings. Actually, in practice, it's really been GWP staff that maintains the records, but the secretary is to sign resolutions and so forth. Your terms of office?
I'm sorry, just have a question about, shouldn't the secretary be the pro tem if the president is absent?
That can be. The GWP, the Glendale Municipal Code actually calls for us to elect someone, but we can certainly have that person be secretary. You know, it's.
Well, the current practice is that the chair, in the absence of the chair, then the vice chair takes over. So I think that's the practice that we would continue doing.
Okay. Regarding the terms of office, you have 4-year terms of office, and those are coterminous with the council person that appointed you to the commission. You can serve up to 2 consecutive terms that post-date any term to which you were elected if it was during October or November of 2009, and that's because at that point in time the procedures for being nominated and the term process changed. So those pre-existing terms were grandfathered, if you will, and as of now it's a 2-term limit, 2 consecutive term limit. There is a section that allows you to be appointed for more than that if the City Council makes findings, which is that it's in the best interest of the city and that there's no other person that can be appointed. A quorum of this commission is 3 out of the 5 commissioners. We would need at least 3 of you here in order to hold a meeting, although a smaller amount of you could adjourn to a date and time certain. Your regular meetings per the code are to take place once a month. You can also call special meetings, which can be called either by the president or by any 3 members of this commission. And the Brown Act applies to all your meetings. We'll get into the Brown Act in a little more detail in a few minutes. Absences from the commission. Attendance is obviously very important. As I said, we need at least 3 of you here to run our meetings. You can't have any more than 3 consecutive absences, and you must attend at least 75% of the meetings in any given 12-month period, which runs from the time of your appointment. Now, if a meeting gets canceled by the city staff, that doesn't count as an absence for you. You get credited as if you had attended. The one exception to that is that if the meeting gets canceled because there's no quorum, if you are one of the people that said you couldn't be there, that counts as an absence. If up until the time the meeting got canceled you were planning on attending and you stated that you'd be there, then that counts as an attendance. And you don't want to be in the situation of having all those absences, because then it gets referred to a committee of the president and council members, and they look at your absences and decide whether they're going to excuse them, and it goes to the council. So I don't think we'll end up in that situation, though, just as an FYI.
Now, I'm just curious, does special meetings count as regular scheduled meetings?
The code refers to regular scheduled meetings, so I guess there's some ambiguity there. I could consult with the city attorney on that and get his interpretation on that, but I think just the general idea is to plan on attending meetings when you can.
Right. I mean, like today's meeting, even though it was rescheduled from July 1st, this is considered a special meeting. So if someone is absent from this meeting and missed the next 2 months' meeting, is that considered a 3rd absence? Or does today's meeting as a special meeting doesn't really count towards that absence?
Yeah, it would depend how we interpret that regular scheduled meeting. So I can get back to you on that. I would like to discuss with the city attorney and get his interpretation.
I don't think anyone's going to be missing 3 meetings in a row, but just to clarify what the actual rule states.
That's an excellent question. So let me see what I can find out. Okay, so your powers and duties, what is and what isn't within the scope of your jurisdiction as a commission. So the Glendale Municipal Code, Chapter 2, Section 72.140, enumerates the duties of this commission. Now, you have the express duties that are stated in the code. You also have implied duties that are inherently implied from those expressly stated statutory duties. So the first is investigations. You investigate the operations of the facilities of Glendale Water and Power and the need for changes or additions to its plant or to its operation, and you're to make recommendations to the council accordingly. The next is to make recommendations, similar to what we just discussed. You investigate and you can recommend to the council ways and means of financing changes or additions to the plant or the operation. And you make recommendations either to the city manager or to the council. So, for example, if we're to discuss electric rates with you, that would be well within your purview to make those types of recommendations with regard to the financing. Next is changes in administrative policy. So you can recommend to the city manager changes of administrative policy that you feel are desirable so that we, Glendale Water and Power, can better serve the needs of the public. The next subclause of this section says that your powers and duties are of an advisory nature. So you have an advisory role. You're not to direct the conduct of the department. And if you note in all those preceding clauses, it talked about making recommendations to the city manager, making recommendations to the city council. So those recommendations would be to those persons or those bodies and not directly to the department. Lastly, you do serve as an appeals board for certain types of appeals. And if you look at the code section I've attached, it's going to refer to some esoteric code sections. So what those are is if someone's delinquent on a master meter account, there's a penalty associated with that because we have to go out and notice that on the property. Penalties for meter tampering and theft of water and electricity. So if someone disputed the general manager's determination that they had stolen electricity or water, that is an appeal that could come before this body. And penalties for failure to test backflow prevention devices, which prevent intermingling of dirty water and drinking water. So those types of appeals would come to you, and there are in your packet the procedures that were developed for those appeals, which lay out the time frames of when someone would submit their appeal, how you'd go about reviewing it. And in the event that we get one of those appeals, we'll certainly walk you through that process. So the procedures for running your meetings. Generally, we follow Robert's Rules of Order. It's not a legal violation if we somehow don't do the motion right, but we really strive to use Robert's Rules of Orders to help the meetings run smoothly. And that's essentially the motion, the second, the vote. And I have some of the most common procedures in your packet for you just to review how we typically go about doing it, but I will be here to help you through that as we go through our meetings. This commission has been somewhat perhaps more proactive than other commissions, I would say, in adopting procedures for itself as far as how it wants to run its meetings. And in that regard, this commission has adopted a specific procedure regarding public speakers and agendizing future commission business. And I've put all of those in your packet. But just to summarize, the time limits for public speakers, this commission previously decided that it would allow 5 minutes per public speaker. And that it is within the discretion of the president of the commission, however, to reduce or extend that time as the situation warrants. So if you have lots and lots of speakers, it may be appropriate to limit the time to, say, 3 minutes. If someone wants to go on longer, and it's the prerogative of the president to extend that time. We would just urge you not to do that on the basis of the content of what they're saying, because we have to remain neutral as to what they're saying under the First Amendment. So it has to be strictly based on time, place, and manner types of restrictions.
Can I ask a question on that? So, what is the practice for managing if you decide that it's going to be 5 minutes or 3 minutes or 4 minutes? Who manages the process of timing speakers? Is that done by the president or someone else?
Commissioner Camagro, that would be the president of the commission that would make that determination, and it's best to announce that at the outset of when the public speakers come, because you don't want to give someone 5 minutes and then the next person give them 3, and then there's this impression that you're playing favorite. So, generally you get speaker cards. In the back of the room there's cards, and those people will submit their cards if they want to speak on an item. So we'll have a sense of just how many people on a given item.
And the practice is that we normally give speakers 5 minutes because depending on the agenda item and the type of agendas on the scheduled meetings, typically speakers get 5 minutes unless there's a lot of speakers. Then we would limit that to 3 minutes. So it's all at the discretion of the president.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Now, Members of the public are also allowed to make electronic presentations. They can do their own PowerPoint if they want. There will be a ticker that runs across the bottom that indicates that it's submitted by the speaker. We don't screen those for content because, again, First Amendment issues. However, anything that a member of the public presents has to be within the jurisdiction of this commission. So if someone wanted to come and talk to you about fire department pensions, that's not within your jurisdiction. So you want to be mindful of the fact that you've got your role and that any comments should be directed to that, the topics that are within your purview. You've also got a policy for agendizing future commission business, and that was actually most recently revised at our last meeting, as you saw from the minutes. The way that this commission has set it up is that during our meetings, you'll see on your agenda in the future, we've got something called agenda forecast. And that is the point in time during the meeting when it's been the practice of this commission to discuss what will go on a future agenda. So the president will ask for any items that any other members of the commission want to be brought to a future meeting. And he'll also ask if there's a second person interested in hearing that item. And that's because your policy says that you need 2 members to express an interest in having an item on the agenda. That said, in between meetings, the president has the right to unilaterally request that an item be placed on the agenda and to have an item so agendized in consultation with staff. And so the president can contact our acting general manager and request that we agendize a certain topic of business, and they can discuss the timing of it and the scope, and that will be put on a future agenda. And that's the practice we've followed. The other commissioners, if you wanted to have something on an agenda and it's between a meeting, under the Brown Act, any 3 members of this commission can request something to be agendized. So we would just need to hear from 3 of you. The trick is, as we will discuss under the Brown Act, is you can't all discuss it outside of the meeting. So the kind of best way to go about it is to do this agenda forecast procedure and just let us know that you'd like to have something presented.
But just to clarify, to satisfy the Brown Act, outside of meeting, another commissioner can contact the president, and then the president can discuss with staff. Potentially, those are 2 commissioner discussion outside the meeting. So that satisfies the Brown Act violation. So that could still work, right?
Absolutely, and we'll discuss that in a second. It is a slippery slope, these discussions outside of meetings, and that could lead to a serial meeting, as they call them, where you're kind of discussing stuff online, and next thing you know, you're developing a concurrence outside the meeting. But absolutely, if one commissioner wants to contact you and request an item and you feel it's worthy, you go ahead and contact our acting general manager, and we can coordinate on that. Okay, and lastly, let's see, the appeals procedure, which I briefly mentioned, that's in your packet. If you get an appeal, we can go through that in more detail, but it lays out the timeframes and how those appeals are handled. Okay, so let's talk briefly about the Brown Act. It does apply to this Glendale Water and Power Commission, and our meetings qualify as a meeting under the terms of the Brown Act. And as I was just saying, it's important to note that discussions that take place outside of a meeting, emails exchanged, discussions offline, could also potentially be a meeting if there's a quorum. So if 3 of you are involved in that discussion, that constitutes a meeting. So we need to be very, very careful about that. So a serial meeting, what I was just describing when we were talking about the agenda process. That's a series of communications, each of which involves less than a quorum, so 2 of you discussing, but which taken as a whole involves a majority of the body's members. So on the next slide, we have sort of an illustrative example of how this discussion could flow. And on the next slide, an illustration of what that discussion might be. So Commissioner A emails Commissioner B, I need your vote for that program, what do you think? By the way, I have C and D lined up to vote in support of it. So you're developing this concurrence outside the meeting, and that is a no-no under the Brown Act. There's a case, and this is the only case I'm going to cite, I'm not going to bore you with legal citations, that the upshot of which is that individual briefings are fine. So staff can meet with you one-on-one and discuss things, but we as staff need to be very careful not to tell you what other commissioners think and not be sort of the mechanism by which we have that concurrence taking place. And in that case, the fact that the council members claimed to know what the other council members were thinking, that in and of itself was a Brown Act violation. So we need to be very careful. Our staff is well versed in this, and we're very careful about what we will and won't say to you in that type of individual meeting, but just want to make sure you're mindful of that as well.
One of the other concerns would be spoke of the wheel or hub of the wheel conversations too, where A talks to B and C talks to D, and then B and C talk to each other, and that constitutes a serial meeting as well.
Absolutely. Thank you for bringing that up. So, again, the key is to avoid developing a collective concurrence, either directly or through a conduit, whether it's spoken wheel or whether it's the chain of discussions that go on. And we need to be really careful about those emails and discussions outside of meetings. So sometimes we'll get into a discussion about meeting coordination, or I'll send something out to you where I'm giving you legal advice on something, and I'll usually put in there something along the lines of, please don't reply to all. And so, you can individually reply to me, and then I can address your questions about the legal aspects. Okay, next slide. The Brown Act, in addition to talking about what is a meeting, what you can do in and outside of a meetings, talks about our agendas and what we can discuss in our meetings. So you cannot discuss items in any great depth during your meetings that are not on your agenda, because we do post those agendas in advance of the meeting so that members of the public can come and have some notice that they can come and give their input on those topics. So if we start talking about something we haven't agendized, it deprives the public of the opportunity to have come and participated in that discussion. You can briefly respond to comments made by members of the public, and there are no secret ballots. We don't do that here anyway. We have voice votes, or we take vote by roll call, but there will be no secret ballots. Public access. So members of the public have the right to come before this body and speak to you about members within the subject matter jurisdiction of this commission. We can't require conditional attendance. What this means is that you can't require them to tell you their name, tell you their address. You have to let anyone speak. Generally, members of the public come up and they announce themselves, and they will tell you who they are, but you can't deny someone the opportunity to speak if they're not willing to give you that information.
And also, to clarify, they don't even have to be a resident of Glendale, right?
No, thank you for bringing that up. It could be a resident from any city. It could be from any state. They can come and they can appear before you. They have that right. The public must have the opportunity to address you during consideration of the item. So if you have an item that's an action item and you are about to do a motion on it, if there's a speaker card or someone has expressed their interest in speaking on it, you must consider their comments and their input before you move to approve or reject that item. You need to take their input into consideration. Okay, next slide. And the public can be critical. They can be critical. They can come and tell you that they don't like the way that GWP is doing its business. They don't like the city. They don't like this commission. And it's the rules, the thick skin rule. They're entitled to do that. That's what makes America so great, is that members of the public have the right to come and express their opinion about their government. The public can also tape the meetings or record them, and they do have the right to do that as long as it's not interfering with the meeting, too much light, too noisy. It's just, as long as it's not disruptive, they do have the right to do that. And if the public does make comments during oral communications, you can respond to it briefly. Again, it's not agendized. You can refer it to staff to look into the matter, or you can ask us to put it on a future agenda as part of that agenda setting process. Now, one key thing with regard to oral communications, the topics that can be covered during oral communications are items that are not agendized. So the public has the opportunity to give their input on the agendized items, and they should do so when those items are brought up. When it gets to the oral communications, it's not another opportunity to talk about an item that's already been agendized. It's anything else within your jurisdiction that they want to bring to your attention or speak to you about. Okay. On items that aren't on the agenda, we would just ask that you be brief. Any announcements, when we get into the discussion about the agenda, we can talk about which agenda it should go on, get an understanding from you about what exactly you're looking for us to bring. But we don't want to get into a substantive discussion about it because, again, we need to allow the public the opportunity to participate. We would not get into a debate or discussion about those items. And that concludes my presentation. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Questions for Ms. Godinez? I just have one question about the ethics training. Is that coming up for every commissioner, or just refresher, or only for new commissioners?
That is coming up. I don't have a date for it yet, but the city attorney indicated he'd be giving one in the next few months. And as soon as we get that date scheduled, I'll let all of you know so that you can attend.
Okay, thank you. All right, next item, please.
Five, oral communications.
I don't have any cards with me, so there's no one wanting to speak, so next item.
6, agenda forecast.
So pretty much we have a meeting next week on Monday, just solely on electric revenue enhancement, right? Is there an opportunity to put anything on there, or that's the only thing that we want to discuss?
President Yao, members of the Commission, there is an opportunity to put additional items on that agenda that is a regular meeting of this Commission. I would encourage the Commission, though, to really try to focus on that particular item. It is a lengthy presentation. It's really the people who will show up to speak to that likely want to focus on that. But with that said, the Commission can add additional items to that agenda if they wish to do so.
Any interest on agenda items?
No, I recommend just keeping that item only. I think there will be speakers, and the discussion and the presentation, I understand, will be quite long.
Yes, that's
So I
correct.
agree.
What about future months? Any changes or additions or deletions of any agenda items?
We have a full agenda on the 5th. Do you think the managers and staff will be ready for all of those items for August?
President Yao, members of the Commission, in having discussed the future agendas with our staff, nobody has raised any concerns. We've known that this particular meeting was coming up. I would presume that everything is ready to move forward as presented at this point.
Well, on the 5th, if I can ask Commissioner Chan to preside over that, because I'll be absent on the 5th. So potentially, if there's any issues that you want to keep or transfer to a different month, then that's up to this body. But I would ask if Commissioner Chan can preside over on August the 5th meeting.
Is there anything here that you would prefer to
I would
over
prefer
September?
to move feed and tariff to the 9th so that I can, September. Yes, September. So I'm interested in that report. Is that okay with this, with everybody? We do that?
I understand we need to comply by July, and so we are already late, I think.
No, I think it's been approved by
If I
council.
may,
It's just a report.
yes, it's already been approved by
Okay,
council,
great.
so we're all set. It's just a report so that you know
Oh, okay.
what was
Okay.
adopted.
Then, yeah, if it doesn't negatively impact anything, yeah, September will be fine.
Let's move the feed and tariff report to September. So the rest, I can catch up and review the tapes. I'm sure there'll be maybe potential responses from the grand jury report, but I can keep that. I'm interested in that, but if it's something that we don't want to hold off anymore, just might as well have that discussion amongst the people who are here. Any of the other agenda items you guys want to add? If not, then we can close the business of the agenda forecast. Great. And
7, adjournment.
any motion to adjourn?
So moved?
Second. So adjourn. Thank you, everyone. See you next week.